On September 1st, 2023, the Pokemon Company will be releasing 2 new decks in a new format. This is the Deluxe Battle Deck that are level 2 decks that are in between your beginner-friendly level 1s, and your hyper-competitive level 3 battle decks. And the 2 flavors of decks we are getting are Quaquaval EX with Radiant Greninja and Meowscarada EX with Radiant Alakazam. If you can only get one, what would it be? And I guess if you want to get both, sure, get both. If you want to get none of these, that's fine as well. We are going to break down both decks, compare and contrast, and hopefully by the end of this video, you have a better understanding of if these decks are right for you and which one to get if you can only get one. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. And the way we're going to do this is that we're going to talk about each deck, the general strategy. We'll talk about what the decks have, what they don't have, and why you should pick one deck over the other. So the first deck is the Quaquaval EX deck. And the general strategy for this deck is you want to use its Spiral Shot attack. And we can see it on the box here. Spiral Shot for only 2 energy, 1 water, 1 colorless, does 230 damage, but you have to put the energy back into your hand. And the general idea of this deck is you want to use this attack over and over again with the support of the Baxcalibur line, which lets you reattach the energy and attack over and over, doing big damage. And sometimes you will attack with Radiant Greninja as well with its Moonlight Shuriken attack, lets you do 90 damage to 2 targets. On the other side, we have Meowscarada EX, which does not do as much damage, and there's a qualifier to getting its big damage. So for 2 colorless energy, Scratching Nails does 100 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon already has damage on it, this does 120 more damage. So 220 damage potentially, but you have to also have damage on your opponent's active Pokemon, which you can do with the combination of Bouquet Magic. You discard a Grass Energy, you drop 3 damage counters onto your opponent's bench Pokemon of your choice, and then you use the Alakazam's Painful Spoons ability to move it to the active. However, you don't necessarily have to do it that way. You can use Bouquet Magic and Painful Spoons to knock out smaller Pokemon on the bench, giving you some more interesting ways of winning the game. So that's kind of the general rundown of how these decks work. This one hits a little harder and hits pretty much just the active with a little bit of sniping. This one doesn't hit quite as hard, but has a lot more bench sniping, is probably the best way to sum it up. Now, in terms of the EX cards themselves, which one is better? We're going to hop to PTCG Live for this. Meowscarada versus Quaquaval. I think the answer is pretty straightforward. It's Meowscarada EX. It is a card having the ability to do spread damage to the bench while also having a pretty solid attack here makes this a much stronger Pokemon, generally speaking. The Quaquaval EX, the big problem, yes, it does a little more damage in the 230, but having to lose that energy and put it back into your hand can be a real problem. If you lose the Baxcalibur or you aren't able to get it set up, you're kind of screwed. And Exciting Dance by itself, there are some strategies if you build this deck out a little differently where you can use Exciting Dance and switch into something to block you, such as a Mimikyu or a Klefki. But this is a much weaker Pokemon in a competitive sense, especially if you're planning on making upgrades. Quaquaval is not particularly strong. Meanwhile, Meowscarada is there's definitely some discussions happening right now. Some people did recently play it at NAIC and they did okay. This one has a competitive potential, and at this point in time, Quaquaval does not. In terms of like the other Pokemon in each of the decks, oops, I accidentally edited it, came out of here. They both have Pokemon that support their general game plans really well. The Radiant Alakazam is a perfect fit for Meowscarada, allowing you to move the damage around. And then you've got the Eldegoss here, which is a really nice touch. Helps you get the energy out of the deck so that you can accelerate your Meowscarada and discard for Bouquet Magic as well. Meanwhile, the Radiant Greninja in the The Quaquaval deck does give you the option to draw more cards with concealed cards, potentially attack with Moonlight Shuriken, though you're probably not doing that as much in the way this deck is built. And the Baxcalibur is awesome in that not only does it let you attach any water energy you have from your hand to your Pokemon, but a lot of water decks going forward are going to be using Baxcalibur for energy acceleration. And even if you don't end up using Quaquaval as your attacker, like if you wanted to make customizations to the deck, you're going to have a Baxcalibur line here, which is absolutely awesome and useful in other decks going forward. In terms of trainer cards, these all have a decent lineup of trainer cards that support the deck's general strategy. I like that the Quaquaval deck has copies of Irida in here that lets you search out Pokemon, water Pokemon, and items from your deck. That's the core of what you're trying to do. We've got some energy retrieval here to get the energy back into your hand that Baxcalibur can then attach onto your Pokemon later. And I think the big thing that I love about this deck is that it comes with Rare Candy, which allows you to skip the stage 1 evolution and go straight from Quaxly to Quaquaval in one go. This is incredibly important to note here, and we're going to come back to this note in a second, because it makes it, this in combination with Irida, makes it decently possible that on your second turn, you're going to be able to get Quaquaval set up, attacking with Spiral Shot, and then on the third turn, you can get Baxcalibur set up and continue your general strategy that way. The big downside with the trainer card lineup here, Youngster's not great, but like the biggest thing here is there's no boss's orders, which means you cannot gust a Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon, from the bench to the active, and you have to hit what's in the active all the time, which is a real bummer, and I really wish Pokemon had squeezed in some boss's orders into this deck. As for Meowscarada, this one I think is actually a little worse in the way that it is built because of some of the choices that are made in its deck design. We have kind of a similar route, like we have Professor's Research and Jacq and Youngster. Klara's really nice here. 4 copies of Youngster is probably a bit much. I would have preferred if they were able to squeeze in something like Iono or Judge or even Roxanne here. Unlike the Quaquaval deck, this does have boss's orders, which is amazing for gusting. However, there's no rare candy in this deck. There's no rare candy in this deck, which means you're not really attacking until the third turn of the game, which is really problematic in the Pokemon trading card game, because if you want to have any sort of competitive viability, you pretty much have to be set up on the second turn. And even the best decks like a Gardevoir, which does have a bunch of stage 2 Pokemon, you can use rare candy to get set up. And even if you don't get set up, you can still use Kirlia's ability to draw more cards and forge your agenda that way. Meowscarada doesn't have that, unfortunately. You can go into the Floragato and you're not really doing much of anything here. And on top of that, this deck does not come with double turbo energy, which is really unfortunate because you can use double turbo energy to charge up Meowscarada in one attachment and attack. Even if you're doing 20 less damage, being able to attach just one energy and get rolling is huge. And unfortunately, this deck doesn't do that. So the combination of having to attach multiple energies and have multiple stage 2 set up makes this deck really difficult to set up. If you don't have the perfect combo, and if your opponent isn't gusting you up, then maybe you have a chance. But it's actually pretty easy to take this deck apart. Like, you're one boss's orders away from losing the Floragato with the energy on it, and now you have no means of being able to set up your deck, and you're screwed. So those are things to consider between these two decks. Now, that being said, with the two decks that we have here, the Quaquaval and the Meowscarada, if you have no plans on upgrading these decks whatsoever, then Quaquaval is technically the better of the two. It is a little bit better built in the sense that you are getting consistency cards that help you get set up faster and more consistently. Irida, Rare Candy, helps you get the Quaquaval out a little more consistently, and you've got time for turn 3 to get the Baxcalibur set up so that you can continually attack for 230 damage. Unfortunately, the Meowscarada is such that it's going to be really hard to set up because it doesn't have the Rare Candy in there and because it doesn't have double turbo energy in order to get set up as fast as the Quaquaval deck. However, if you're going to make any sort of upgrades to these decks, then Meowscarada is the clear choice. And you don't need to go very far for it. Like if you can add 2 Rare Candy and even just 2 double turbo energies to this deck becomes much better than this one. Like if you buy this plus the 2023 Trainers Toolkit, which I'll put a picture of it just over top right here, the Meowscarada deck becomes much better. And I think that if you were to fully trick these decks out, the Quaquaval deck, its ceiling is very low. At best, it's probably a meme deck. Meanwhile, a fully tricked out Meowscarada EX deck, and you can get a pretty decent amount there with like 1 Trainer's Toolkit with the Arceus V-Star and the double turbo energy and the Rare Candies. If you were to fully upgrade Meowscarada, this can be a potentially competitive deck against some of the best decks in the game. Now, keep in mind, as we're having this conversation, this is in the Paldea Evolved meta. There might be some cards in the Obsidian Flames and Pokemon 151 that change the trajectory of these decks. However, based on everything that I've said right now, if you are looking to get one of these decks, if you plan on making 0 changes whatsoever and have no interest in any of that, grab the Quaquaval deck. If you plan on making any sort of changes to these decks and you want something that's a little more competitively viable, Meowscarada all day. And I guess the only other reason you may want to get the Quaquaval deck if you're not making any changes is that if you are looking to build a Baxcalibur based deck and you're going to switch out Quaquaval with like Chen Pao or something like that, maybe this becomes a more viable option. But generally speaking, if you're not making any changes, go with Quaquaval. If you're going to make changes, go with Meowscarada by a landslide. So there you go. Based on the information we have, that's where we're at. I think I'll probably pick up the Meowscarada one. I've been having a ton of fun playing upgraded versions of the Meowscarada deck, and I have the cards to make like a fully built out Meowscarada deck, and I think this is going to be a ton of fun. The Quaquaval deck, I personally don't think is for me, but I definitely see the value in it, especially if you just want a pre-built deck that you can play and have fun with and learn something that's a little more competitively viable, even if its competitive ceiling is pretty low. But yeah, based on what you know, which one are you going to get? Are you going to get either of these? Or are you going to get none of them? Let me know in the comments of this video. But for now, YouTube, I got to get going. Twitch, continue to stick around. We're going to play a little bit more. But YouTube, we got to go. Thank you so much for watching. Some quick plugs. You can find me on, all the things, Twitter or YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. You can find me on Twitch at In Third Person, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, like I am right now. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.